So Wigner was not terribly successful in making converts in the nuclear community. But he did make one convert, this guy, Alvin Weinberg. He was his student during the Manhattan Project. Weinberg got it. He got the big picture. We need thorium, we need thermal reactor, we need liquid fuel. I see it. I see what we got to do. Weinberg got a job offer to be the director of Oak Ridge National Labs in 1955. He was 35 years old. Well, about that time, the Air Force said the Navy has built their nuclear submarines, and the Army has come along and they have taken the same technology as the Navy, the water-cooled reactor, and they're doing their thing. But the Air Force wants to build a nuclear-powered bomber. I mean, does that just sound like crazy? It was just absolutely nuts. Now, Weinberg was a practical man, and he said, nuclear-powered bomber. That is like probably a really, really, really dumb idea. But the military has a lot of money. That the purpose was unattainable, if not foolish, was not so important. A high-temperature reactor could be useful for other purposes, even if it never propelled an airplane. They couldn't use water-cooled reactors. They couldn't use high-pressure reactors. They couldn't use complicated solid-fuel reactors. They had to have something that was so slick, that was so safe, that was so simple, that operated at low pressure, high temperatures, had all the features you wanted in it. They didn't even know what it was. If this program, this nuclear airplane program, had not been established, the molten salt reactor would have never been invented, because it is simply too radical, too different, too completely out of the ball field of everything else for it to be arrived at through an evolutionary development. It had to be forced into existence by requirements that were so difficult to achieve, and the nuclear airplane was that. So they began working on this high-temperature reactor, and here was their notion.
This is called the Fireball, maybe a little bit unfortunate name for a reactor. A 6-foot diameter ball, and that's the actual hot cell, the actual reactor chamber. And that thing put out 70 megawatts of heat for about 7 hours in its first initial experiment.
Well, by this time it was about 1960. ICBMs were going great. We'd perfected air-to-air refueling. The Air Force was going, oh man, I don't think we really need that nuclear bomber anymore.
And Weinberg petitioned the Atomic Energy Commission in the United States for money, and he got a little bit. He got enough to build a demonstration reactor. It was supposed to be less than 10 megawatts, and they built it. It was called the Molten Salt Reactor Experiment. It ran from 1965 to 1969. They didn't have a blanket around it. They just wanted to see, can we get this first step to work? And they were successful. After they completed the Molten Salt Reactor Experiment, they went to the Atomic Energy Commission. They said, hey, gee, can we have some more money? We'd like to go now and build the real thing. We'd like to build the blanket, and we'd like to hook a power conversion system on and make electricity. And they felt like they'd shot the moon. Well, the Atomic Energy Commission, unfortunately, did not share their zeal. They had invested very heavily in an alternative technology, the plutonium fast breeder reactor, based on solid fuels and turning abundant uranium-238 into plutonium-239 and then burning it in the reactor. It involved a whole different set of technologies that was much more in line with the light water reactors. It's funny, even at that time, 50 years ago, nobody thought the light water reactor or the heavy water reactor would be around very long. They were just simply too inefficient in their use of nuclear fuel.
So you might be asking yourself, gee, John, this thing, it's proliferation resistant. It can't blow up because it's not in a pressure vessel. It uses a thing that we commonly think of as a waste product. On and on, it eats other nuclear waste. Why didn't we make it? So we wanted to breed new fuel, and especially breed new weapons material, plutonium, highly enriched uranium. They were going to do that with the fast breeder reactor so that they could put jobs in California, and so it got killed.
Well, like I was saying, the Atomic Energy Commission said, hey, guess what? We're putting all this money in the fast breeder. We've got all these companies lined up to do the fast breeder. They'd even actually built one in Monroe, Michigan. It had had a meltdown. They were undeterred. They were moving forward, and so they told Weinberg to take a hike. Now, the story gets a little more complicated too, because in addition to being a thorium guru, Weinberg was also the original inventor of the pressurized water reactor. He had invented it and gotten his patent for it in 1947. So it was a little bit of a tricky thing to have the inventor of the light water reactor advocating for something very, very, very different. And got a little worse than that too, see, because Weinberg never really was crazy about the light water reactor. He didn't like the fact that it had to run at really high pressure. There would be an accident someday where you were not able to maintain the pressure or keep cooling it.
there could be a meltdown, there could be a release of radioactivity. Does any of this sound familiar? And he was making enough of a stink about this that there was a congressional leader named Chet Holofield,
a member of the Joint Congressional Atomic Energy Committee,
who told Alvin Weinberg, he said, if you're so concerned about the safety of nuclear energy, it might be time for you to leave the nuclear business. He wasn't questioning the value or the importance of nuclear energy. If anything, he was far more convinced about that than anyone else. What he was questioning whether had the right path been taken in the development of nuclear reactors. And he was particularly well suited to make that question because of his role as the inventor of the predominant technology. So he was quietly shown the door.
And the unfortunate thing is, shortly after that, they realized the fast breeders were, not a very good reactor design, kind of dangerous, could run out of control fairly easily. And so that got killed too. And so we've been in a 30-year winter of United States reactor design. And the molten salt reactor became this interesting side note of history until fairly recently.